Welcome to another Sunday afternoon class with BYU, Brigham Young University Library Family History Center. Glad to be here. Kind of an introduction here, first of all. It was just a few months ago that I did a similar presentation. I've adapted that earlier presentation, and the reason for that is that there were so many changes in the Family Search full text search that I had to really kind of start over again and go through the process here. So we're going to go through some background information, give you some perspective, and then we'll get into the latest iteration of what's happening with Family Search. So first of all, the challenge. So Family Search and around the world with other large websites, family history websites, and other archives and everything, museums and societies and all sorts of things have just billions and billions of these handwritten records from going back hundreds of years. But until recently, only a very small number of these records have been actually indexed. So we were forced to go through the information essentially page by page. So we could narrow it down to the extent that we knew the place where we were looking, and we knew the time frame of who we were looking for, and we had a name that may or may not have been useful. But in other words, once we got into the records, it was a matter of looking at the pages and reading the text and getting in. And of course, that put an almost insurmountable barrier for some people, because reading this text is a skill, and it's something that's acquired over a period of time. And to go through the effort of learning how to read the skill, I would characterize it not as painful, but it's probably about as time consuming and difficult as most any really deep academic skills. So this is kind of where we were and are still until all these records are processed. And we have to give credit out to the fabulous volunteers, all the volunteers for over the years that have spent their time looking at the documents and extracting names or extracting information from the documents or even transcribing the documents. This is an indexing program that was a volunteer indexing program sponsored by Family Search. And if you look today, you'll see what I see. I can click all the little things, beginning, intermediate, advanced. I can say all languages, and I have no projects. And the reason for this presentation is that the indexing is going on millions of pages a day, not just thousands of pages a week or a day from the volunteers, by artificial intelligence, handwriting recognition, and then computer-aided indexing and the ability to search entire texts. So that's the kind of the purpose of this, and why we're focusing on it, let's call it, quite frequently here at BYU, and attempting also to help all of the volunteer missionaries that we have at the library to understand the advantages of using these tools. Now, handwriting recognition as it is has been worked on now for over 75 years. We're close to 100 years ago. They started this process of thinking about, is there a way to mechanize reading this kind of handwriting? This is just an example I just pulled up. It's not anything that I was particularly working with, and it's fairly readable to me. When I look at it, I don't see just scribbles. I see words, and I can read most of the context of the words right out of hand. So that's the time spent and skill acquired over just having read literally tens of thousands of documents over the years. That's kind of where they were trying to end up. The question is, when did they get to that point? And The real breakthrough in a big scale was the ancestry transcription of the 1950 U.S. federal census. And the U.S. federal census, millions of names, all handwritten. Okay, so the whole census was handwritten. There's printed forms, which are standard forms, but then all the information that we're interested in had to be read. When the 1940 census came out a few years back, obviously a long time, 10 years back or more, it took them 6 months to get the basic scan done. And then it took many more months, over a period of many, many months, for a concerted group of volunteers to go through and index the 1940 census. So that was kind of a great undertaking. It took a considerable period of time. Maybe some of you volunteered and helped work with the 1940 census. Now, the 1950 census came around. Now, the change in the technology created a different situation. Reading through and, in a sense, transcribing the census and then making it searchable happened in about 6 hours. And so now you can see that compression, getting more of this information. And since they did this 1950 census, that's been a few years, and basically the speed has increased, the accuracy has increased, the ability to transcribe the documents has increased, and that's being used to the advantage of those who take advantage of it. In other words, there's ways to do that. Now, the first question that's going to come up is, what is full text search? And why are we worried about it? Well, if we have an index, the index is always going to be somewhat inaccurate because it's basically based on looking at specific information in a document and in a sense ignoring the rest of the information in the document. So if you're extracting names from wills, for example, let's say that you have a will document that was done 100 years ago. And then you go look at that document and you read through it and you see it tells you the testator who died, the devisees, who are the people that received information out or bequests out of the will. And so all of that information is in there. If you have somebody read through that and a person and take out those names and put them into a search field, and then that becomes an ability to search that document. The question is, who else do you add? Do you add the witnesses? Do you include the person who drafted the will, or the person official who in the court who was in most of those wills are what's called transcribed wills, meaning that the original will that was made by the person was copied by the court clerks into the court records. So the original paper document or whatever it was printed on document was not part of the process. Okay, so you get into that, you begin to think, well, this is awfully confusing. The answer is yes, it could be, and you're missing a lot of information. And what happens when you get here is that what they were trying to do clear back in the 1960s is have the computer read the entire document. Now, what they were doing back then was reading text. So it was text that they were looking. So it was like a book. If you had a printed book, what you would do is somehow ingest that book and into the system, and then be able to search every word in every book and every page. Now, is that possible? Of course, it's possible today. It's something that goes on constantly. In other words, I'm reading books online from library, and I can search on words in that. I just click on a word and I search on it. Or if I needed to look at a digital copy of something, I can find a full digital copy that's searchable, like, for example, on archive.org, archive.org, with 43 million plus books that are completely searchable, word for word. So it unlocks all the information, the readable information. There may be things that are just not readable by anybody because they are too scribbled over or blocked out or whatever. But all the readable information in those documents is now available to be searched. The question is, how do you search it if it's handwritten? And that's where we are today. So I'm qualifying this by saying that at the time of this presentation, full text search was on the FamilySearch.org Labs website, LABS website. Now, it's an experimental website. That means it's going to change. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there has been a lot of changes. And even in the few months ago since I reviewed this particular program, essentially the whole thing has changed. So there was no common basis for me to say, oh, here's a few minor things that changed. No, I had to rewrite the part of the presentation that dealt with full text. Now, do we expect that to happen again? Yes. When is just the question. So we're not going to be in the situation where we're surprised that something is changing, because change is going to be part of this whole process. It'll always it may get more complicated, it may get simpler, but it'll always keep going in one way or the other. In this case, it got a little more complicated actually, but it's still doable. Okay, so this is the key search page, and it's essentially the same. Now, where you put your information is here, and you would see it says keywords. Well, a keyword would have had to have been set up in some way. So a keyword is not something that's automatically in a document. The computer would have had to have looked at it and said, bling, 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 these are keywords. So starting your search initially from the keywords isn't really the best idea. So you just put in a name. Now, there's no format for this, but the name that you enter has to, and I'm going to repeat this probably 2 or 3 times, but the name has to correspond to the way that it's represented in the document. So that if your great 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 grandfather wrote his name as Samuel P. Goodworth, then that's how you're going to have to search to find that. You want to look for all the Samuels? Not going to happen. I mean, you'll get millions and millions of responses. Do you want to look for all the Goodworths? Maybe, because that may be a unique enough name that you're going to get some substantial record, particularly if you focus on the place and the time frame. So when you're looking at the place and you have a name and a place and a time, your chances of finding a document out of all the documents that have been processed so far is very good, surprisingly. So I'll go ahead and we'll show how that works. But basically, that's the idea here. And you just try it. All I'm saying is go in there, try it, put in a name and a place and a year. Now, the actual documents that have been transcribed is another question. And that's down here if you want to find out what's subject to handwriting recognition already and have been processed. So these are down here as where it says browse all collections, gives you a list of the documents that have been worked on. And this is a good statement. It's right there on there, and it converts an image of text into a machine readable text format. The ability to search the full text of these records before they're even indexed. The question is, are they ever going to be indexed? The answer to that probably is still being sort of discussed. And as this gets more accurate and even faster than it has been in the past, I doubt if indexing will ever be done. And indexing is kind of an old way of processing information, and this is the new way. And so if I have a full text of the document, why do I need an index? I can ask for all of the instances of my ancestors' names in any document, and it'll show me. I'll highlight them or whatever, or give me an access to all of them. So the number of collections of records that have been processed is constantly increasing. So that results, basically, I just put in, give me a list of everything. And you can see that just a few days ago, there were some significant amounts of records. Now, when it says records, that means how many of the records of those collections have been processed. Now, it may agree, and that may be the total number of records in that collection, or it may be only partial number of the records in that collection. So these numbers are going to change, and the number of records involved are going to change. But you can quickly see if there are any records for the places that you're interested in doing research in. So if you look in Palau, for example, island out in the Pacific, you can see immediately if they've done any records from that place. And so this is a separate collection of records from Family Search. They're records from Family Search, but this has kind of been separated out as full text search records. And so it's not the latest thing, which it didn't even come in. I don't think, maybe I put it in here. We'll see. Is that they begin marking in the catalog. So when you do a catalog search and the record comes up and the list of digitized records are there, there's an additional icon to the right that shows a little page with a star on it. It's not really a plus sign, it's actually a star. And that star means that that particular document is subject to full text search. So there's still a lot of questions that haven't been answered, but one of them is if you do a search right there out of the catalog, is that going to be a full text search? Is that going to be just a regular search? And the answer isn't really clear right now. But you could come back here to the full text search labs, go to that collection because it will be in this collection, and then be able to do a full text search of all the records in that particular collection that have already been processed. So here's just a blown up so you can see this a little bit better. There's no more information here. It's just showing you that there's the records and last updated, and then there's the little icon that shows that it's been processed. So let's get into what happens when we start a search. In this case, I'm putting in my great-grandfather, who's my test case, has been for since I started doing genealogy. And the reason for that was this. It's best to start out on these programs searching for things that you already know instead of things that you don't know. Because if you don't know it and you find it, it takes you a long time to determine whether or not it's helpful or not. But if you already know what's there and you find it, you can say, oh, that's new information, or, oh, I already knew that. But then you understand what it is you're going to get when you start doing the research. So the first step here is to work on getting information about someone. Now, if you try people that are too close to the present, you're going to run into the privacy rules and you're going to have records that aren't searchable and et cetera and et cetera. So from a practical purpose, go to people that were born sometime in the late 1800s. If you have any of them in your family tree, just try those people and see what comes up. Now, one of the things that's on here is all the census records. So it's a fast way to get all that information. So now there's some advanced search tips. A lot of these are conventions, methods that have been developed, and they're kind of related back to what's called Boolean algebra, which is an advanced way of parsing and studying information. Now, they're helpful because they tell the computer about variations. And so you can use these to say, I want exactly this name. I want this name with this, I want, etc. So you can go through and use these to enhance and maybe get different results and faster results. But my guess is that if you're doing a search, then you need to figure out how your ancestor was represented in the documents. If you've got somebody named Henry Martin Tanner, you might decide that Henry Tanner never signed his name as Henry Martin Tanner. And so Henry Martin Tanner isn't going to be in any records. So we have to guess what it is. And in my case, as I'll show you in a moment, it was Henry M. Tanner, which is the way he did sign his name. Okay, so here's a search. That's what I put in. Now, there's another point here. I put in a place, and the place I put in was Joseph City, Arizona. And Joseph City, Arizona had at least two different names previously. The first initial name in 1878 was Allen's Camp. The second name that came in 18 whatever was St. Joseph. And meanwhile, it started out in Apache County, and then when Navajo County was formed, it became part of Navajo County. So there's all these different name places, and those will help searching on all of those different iterations. You can call it Allen's Camp in Arizona, or Allen's Camp in Apache County, Arizona, or St. Joseph in Navajo, Arizona, or anything doing but keep your year range inclusive. So it's bigger year range than just that. And this case, Henry always signed his name Henry M. Tanner. And so here we are. We've got 39,806 responses. Now, does that sound like Google search? Yes, it does. Does it sound like an Edge search? Yes, it does. Anyway, what you're doing here is wondering, well, how am I going to ever go through 39,000? You're not going to go through 39,000. The ones that match that the most reasonably are going to be there. And in this case, the number of matches were fairly significant. There's probably 30 or more. And each of these tell you how many matches there were with that in that format. So there's 30 matches on that, and there's 33 matches with that information. And so you're going to be able to go down through here, and you're going to find out that from my perspective, my ancestor, my great-grandfather, I'm going to find out that he signed an awful lot of documents in his days. And that awful lot of documents is a long, long list of things that he signed: deeds and mortgages and encumbrances, voting registers, tax, everything. And it's all coming out with this one search and remarkable accuracy. So that's kind of the situation. So I'm telling you that you might be surprised to see one or more documents about your ancestor immediately. But if you strike out completely, go back and try all the alternatives, all the alternative places, all the alternative name forms, any possible nicknames, anything of that nature. This is just as a kind of a free form. You're trying to guess what's on the documents that have been processed. Now, we've had over the last period of time that this has been working its way through our way of looking at things. In the library, people have found remarkable documents that have helped them break through traditional, what we call brick wall type things, and lots of things like that. I have found fabulous number of documents about my most remote Tanner and ancestor, and they might be helpful in finding more information when I have time to go through what appears to be maybe close to 100 documents. Now we're getting into the changes here. This particular slide shows the older form of the website, and one of those main things was the image attribution. And the only thing I would say here is you look for other documents that were acquired from the same place. In other words, if you find a document from a county in Ohio, then by all means look for all the other records in that county in Ohio, because that's where you're going to be and focus on and find some information. So now here's the new icons that just came out in the last little while that I noticed, and they're up there in the upper part. But first of all, we've got to know what you're looking at here on the screen. The first thing is this the original document. Your search terms are highlighted, in this case in yellow. And then the transcription is also highlighted. So now you see what it is. The transcription of that document is going to be valuable because it's here. How accurate is this transcription? Well, at this point, it's accurate to the extent of an expert who was doing the transcription. And so if there's something in here in the document that looks like a typo or something that's not clear, and you go to the original document and look at it, you may find that that's the reason it's not clear. It's because it's not clear in the original document, or that it's damaged and it wasn't read properly. So there's maybe a strike through or something that created a problem. And then down at the bottom is the actual collection of the documents. So all you have to do is start clicking to the right or left and come up with more documents that may be related to this document or may be related to other members of the family or just maybe other documents. So what you would find in the court record. So here are the icons that are new at the top of the page. And so we're going to run through these icons here. And this is all that's changed. And I don't have a time depth on it because I looked at it. I've been looking at it about every day, but I only focused on it a few days ago in deciding that I needed to even update the update that I already had to the previous presentation. So now all these new icons have changed. The icons now they all look kind of familiar. You've got an eye, which means sort of look at this for information. You've got a person one. You've got a paperclip icon, which is obviously to attach something to this document. You've got a download of whatever it is. So let's look at each of those icons here. I run a little video that'll give us the names of all those. That's names, that's transcript, that's information, that's save the record, that's image attribution, that's view grid, that's download, that's full screen, that's adjust the image, that's reset the view, and that's zoom out or in. Okay, so those are the actual icons that they show today as of the date that I did this, which was pretty much yesterday. So this is just a complete change to the icons, and it's very recent, but it's doable, it's workable. And one thing you need to know, you need to really have your program open, Family Search or whatever you're working on, to give Family Search some information because if you're working on Family Search Family Tree, you can use the ID numbers here to add the documents directly to your memories or as sources. So you can add all these source documents if you download the images, you can upload the images as memories. So there's quite a, like I said, if you have it turns out a lot of documents, it may turn out to be kind of a semi-major operation here. But if you just do by name, that's one thing. But if you just type in the number, you're going to go to that person. So that's a good way to get in and out of this and have it ready. But you're going to come up with a lot of people listed. In other words, over here, in this case, all the Tanners in the Tanner family were back there in Joseph City were listed here. So if they're in that document, which is visible when you're doing this, you can click down, and as you read through the document and say, all these people were in the document, and then it will automatically attach the document as the source to those people. So you'll be able to get back to this particular source. So it's attached to all the people. Now, why is this interesting? This is Henry Tanner deed, and this deed I'm going to venture to say has no one has seen previously. The only way this document could have been discovered would be to have sat down in the clerk's office in Navajo County and gone through records page by page. Now, they may have what's called a grantor-grantee deed, and that may have shown where all the documents were for Henry Tanner because they would have had it as there as either selling or buying the property, a grantor and a grantee deed. But all the other names in this document which appear may not have been in their index, but you wouldn't have the index anyplace else except at the courthouse in Navajo County in Holbrook. So you'd be looking for, you know, who knows how much time it would take to go through all the documents and pull out all these, and then request copies from the court, and then get copies of the court, pay for the copies, and whether they let you sit there long enough to go through the whole thing would be another question. So once these were digitized and put on Family Search, in a sense, the grantor-grantee deeds index was lost. It may have been copied either separately or in conjunction with this particular record. It may be at the beginning or it may be at the end of this record. But on the other hand, if it isn't in existence, then the only way to get into the document was page by page by page. And regardless, all of that was very time consuming. And so basically, the full text search gives this whole information to you in a matter of seconds. Okay. So here it is. This is Navajo Deeds, 1901 to 1910, image 103 of 925 pages. So going through nearly 1,000 pages would take a while. Now, I said to look at variations of the name, and that's extremely important because they may or may not have been put into the document the same way every time. We'd want to look for Henry Martin Tanner because of his name, and Henry M. Tanner and just Henry Tanner. And I don't know if he had any, I've not seen any particular nicknames for him, but they may have had a nickname. And if he had a nickname, he might try some nicknames also. So now you put in that all of those variations. Now, when you're starting out on this process of kind of visualizing this artificial intelligence aided handwriting recognition thing, it really gets you into the mode of imagining what it would be like if I could find everything there was in all those records sitting in Rhode Island or in New York or in Ohio or Illinois or Utah or Arizona or wherever. So I'm thinking of all the names, all the places, and all the dates that could be associated with my ancestors. So here's the true end of the line person for the Tanner family that ended up being in Utah and Arizona and around the western part of the United States and now around the world. Bear in mind that when we're looking at this on Family Search, we're going to find some things that are different. And one of the things is that this William Tanner person has been a traditional revolving door ancestor. There's another copy of him that is absolutely has no basis on reality, that has that's changed like every week, 2 or 3 times a week. And they keep adding and taking things out and adding and taking things out. And the information that there is totally not correct. So this one was created as a kind of a separate individual. And me and my daughters who are involved in this are fiercely defensive of keeping this correct. So, and I might mention that there is coming something that will save us from this problem in the future, and they're called CET trees. That's Charlie Alpha Tango trees. And they are, you can look it up for Family Search CET trees. It'll tell you about what they're doing. They're going to be user owned and user maintained trees. So that will kind of give us a way to kind of freeze this on our own tree and let Family Search do whatever. Okay, so the question is, if I look for this person and all I know is his name so far, William Tanner, and I see no variations in that at all. It's always just William Tanner. And his marriage, it's got to be about 1707 because we have three of his children listed. And so we're going to use that information, and it's Kingstown, Rhode Island, or South Kingstown, Rhode Island. And both of those are places that we'll be looking. So now I do a search. Well, okay, so I'm going to go back. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back first of all. That was an example of going back in time. This one is a Henry M. Tanner example, and there's still a lot of different examples with different steps. And this one, oh, this is the variation of Allen's Camp, Apache County, Arizona, with 13 additional records. These happen to be death records. They're death records for people in this family. And these are all people marked that so far on this list of the people, these are correct. They're my ancestors, and these are all. I may have already had all these death records. I may have found in the past have found records of everyone that was available, but this will show me that list really quickly. And you may be surprised. And this is my grandmother's death certificate. But of course, over here on the side is the transcription of all the information that's there. So now when you have somebody staring like this that I come across quite frequently, and I show them the death certificate and I say, can you read that? And they go, uh-huh. And I go, oh, well, you want me to read it to you? But here's the computer reading it to you. And it may or may not be completely accurate, but you want to kind of check it if you want to, but at least the basic information is going to be correct. Now let's say I wanted to try a more general search. In that case, I'm going to just use Tanner. Okay, Tanner. In Apache County, Arizona. No dates. I want from the inception of Apache County, whenever it was created back in the 1800s, up to the present time. I just want to see how many Tanners in there. There's 2,724 results. And a lot of those are just Apache in Arizona, but there's lots of Tanners in here. And there are coroner inquest records, there's court records, there's all this kind of stuff. And this is a tremendously faster way to get a pile of these documents than any other method we've had previously. And just going through these is going to be really interesting. Some of them aren't related, some of them are related, and maybe they're going to give you information that you never knew about at all. Okay, so here's one of the records that showed up in doing this document search. And I searched for this using traditional methods quite a while ago. It's been a long time since I did this particular search. My grandfather, my father's father, my paternal grandfather, was a volunteer military at the border war, which was the war with Mexico. And after that, because he was still in the National Guard, he was called up and was shipped off to Europe right at the end of World War I. And finding the unit that he was in and the information about his unit was about as difficult as a research job that I've ever done. Until it turned out that my father had all his military papers in his little storage boxes. And when I inherited the storage boxes from my father, I found all this information. But anyway, that's another story. But this one would have saved me like months of looking around, and that was his discharge record, which tells exactly where he served and when he served. These are the kinds of things that may just turn up as we do full text searches. And obviously over there, we have the text and we have the handwritten part of the document transcribed. So here's what a document looks like up close. Now, it's no problem reading this because it's all typed, but it's nice to have a transcription of it. And the transcription could be put up on FamilySearch or in other websites, whatever, for that document. So here's an interesting document. And my suggestion is to do a reasonable search through all the responses. Okay, so this is an articles of incorporation of the St. Joseph Irrigation Company. And if you look at the document, it starts out by saying first, second, and third, fourth amended articles of the irrigation incorporation of the St. John's Irrigation Company. Now they didn't get all of the irrigation out of that, but they got that much of the irrigation. So you have a first, second, and third, fourth, first, second, third, and fourth articles of incorporation. So this is a whole process. So if you're interested and you want to know more about this and your involvement of your particular ancestors in the irrigation company or whatever, this is telling you that there are other documents out there. They may have had more information about what was going on here. And if you're interested in writing articles and you want to have some very detailed kind of article for some publication, here's the basis for writing a very significant type of document to get into. And here's the key. I wouldn't even have known to look for this document. There's nothing that I had knowledge of that would have given me a prompt in my head that says, go look for irrigation documents.
So James, there's one question in the chat. After finding a document, can I unhighlight the highlights I
Yeah,
might want to attach to personal print?
yeah, yes, you can. When you save it, it's there. You can, and when you get through the process or go through the process, they disappear. So when you're going to download it, there's not there. Okay? Is that, I'm sure that answers it. Well, the discoveries go on and on. And this is a warranty deed. And a warranty deed is a guaranteed accurate deed on the part of the seller. Once you get into this, here's all the places where they own land. And they were selling it, obviously, at some point in their lives, they needed to sell it. This was 1920. They were getting pretty old by then. Henry died in 1935. So, they had 15 years, but they were getting quite old. This is a remarkable document. Now, this doesn't happen to be handwritten. You can read it, but the transcription gives you a text copy of what's there, which you can use to search for other documents. And my evaluation of this is as the number of processed collections grows, as FamilySearch continues to keep this running and makes more and more and more documents together, the records that you're going to discover are going to be more spectacular. They're just going to be into the range of things that you would never, ever, 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 ever have thought about. if you think of deeds as being something that just has to do with the land sale, that's it. Why would we care? Who knows? Who cares what they sold their land for back then? The answer to that is deeds show you relationships in these whole towns, these little towns around the country, around the world. If you find legal documents back and forth between people, they probably knew each other. There wasn't any way they were going to list this property on something we have like a board online, like Zillow or something, where you could put everything online and get everything, somebody to buy it. That's not what happened. You had to put a post in the newspaper if you wanted to sell it. That would be the biggest thing, or you had to put a sign up and have somebody see it and want to buy the property. So this is kind of a way of also looking at things. So use your imagination. Go back and start looking for people that you would never have thought you could find anything more for. And here we are back in the 1700s, and we are looking at deeds and documents back in here for tanners who lived in my with the same name as my ancestors, which I assume are the people because it shows their relationships. And the three brothers were Francis, Benjamin, and Nathan, and they show up in these documents because they sold land back and forth between each of one of them. And so we have a pretty solid now background that tells me exactly what this family was and where it was and what kinds of lands, the properties they owned and where they were, which will help to identify and split them off from any other William Tanners or Tanners that lived in that Rhode Island at the time. So this has all three of the identified Tanner brothers, the sons of William Tanner, plus the wife of Benjamin Tanner in here. So that's the bonus that we get. So from my perspective, handwriting recognition and full text search are going to provide a flood of undiscovered documents. If you try this and your people just don't show up and you just keep looking a while and you say, this is useless, I'm not finding anything from about mine, then wait a while until more documents have been processed and more documents have been processed. If your people lived in the United States between 1850 and 1950, they're going to be in one of the census records probably, and more. And so you're already going to find them in there. This would be something that you want to know about. Now, the whole problem with AI is that the challenge is finding the search terms or prompts to get the results you want. And that's going to be a learned skill also. You're going to have to spend some time working with your prompts in order to get the things you want. If you want something very precise, you may have to give precise instructions and repeat them and correct the search engine on a chatbot. Now that isn't going to be the case here with the full text search because the full text search is looking at a narrow, what we call a corpus, a narrow body of documents that would be searchable and doesn't have anything to do with other extraneous things. But if you're trying to work with some kind of generative AI or whatever, then what you put in is what you're going to get. And so you're going to have to work at putting in precise instructions to get something if you want something precise. So the key here is to develop your own methodology. And methodology means the way that you do things. And so this is really a good time in the development of artificial intelligence and all of the tools that are floating around now on the internet and all the stuff that's being said about them to adopt the ones you are comfortable with and doing and making sure. But I would, if a suggestion from what I've looked at, not to say anything against ChatGPT, but if you ask them for sources, you're going to have to ask. And if you do that on Gemini, you'll get more specific information. So look at them, look at all of them, Copilot, everyone, and you may find one that you think helps you the most and reflects the way that you want to work. And that's kind of what we're kind of going through right now, is that discovery stage. So thanks for watching.